stop and say, I did it. I did it. I'm responsible. Now, what can I do to heal it? So I want to be responsible for my feelings, because this is, if you could just follow me here, is that all of these occurrences in my life come from this basic model that my actions come from my feelings come from thoughts, and my thoughts come from beliefs. So I have a belief system, which is really just a bunch of thoughts kind of knotted up together. And then one of those thoughts in that knot presents itself to me, generates a feeling, which then has me moving into action, or perhaps frozen in fear, unable to move. But this is what's always going on. So I take responsibility for the action, and this is always the best thing. Don't do anything. Remember, this was what we talked about last week. This process of forgiveness is, the first thing is don't react. Don't do anything for a second. Stop. Because you're going to be responsible for the action that you are contemplating right now. There's no avoiding it. You can try to fool yourself, but you're going to be responsible. So stop for a second. Ask Spirit for some guidance. Make a decision as to what you're going to do based on principle, right? But then you have to take responsibility for that action, which means that even when, a lot of times in the past, and sometimes in the not too distant past, I have done things that I should not have done, and then I try to somehow justify but that's just not helpful. It's just not helpful. You just got to look straight at it, to say, okay, I'm going to admit the mistakes. I'm going to correct it. I'm going to take responsibility for these actions. I'm going to move forward today. And I have to track it back and say, okay, before I did that thing which I regret, what was I feeling? What was the feeling that seemed to move me into that action? Because I'm responsible for my feelings. I need to realize that the feelings are things that motivate me to act. I know that feelings are things that can immobilize me. I know that my feelings have been responsible for many rash actions. I know that my feelings have been responsible for many lost opportunities. And these feelings, of course, we're talking about, they're all wrapped up in fear somehow. There's fear all around it. And that I want to determine to do something different now. I used to say this, and I know that I think everybody said it. They say, I can't help how I feel. Well, that's how I feel. Can't help it. But we can. We can. It's not true. We don't have to be a slave to our feelings. We can change how we feel, and we change how we feel by changing how we think. Because when we ask ourselves, what was I feeling before I did that, or before I sat frozen for who knows how long, what feelings triggered that behavior? Then I can go back and say, okay, so what did I think? What was the thought that came to me right before that feeling? I'm going to take responsibility for that thought. I'm going to be responsible for my thought. I'm going to realize that my thoughts are the triggers of my feelings. And again, we may have thought that we had no control over what we think. But it's not true. We have the ability to change it. We can change our thinking. And how we do this, this is what I used to do, and you've heard me say this before. I used to keep a piece of paper in my pocket that had a list of affirmations on it. I would say, I'm one with God, so what do I have to be afraid of? I am prosperous, I am healthy and whole, just a list of things. And so anytime that a thought would come into my mind that I didn't want, I would get that piece of paper out and say, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert that thought in place of this thought that I don't want. And after doing that for a little while, I just got good at it, and I could just improvise on the spot, so that when a thought came that I didn't want to hold on to, I would just insert a thought that had to do with spirit. That had to do with, I would just insert another, and as we do that, the more, and then working Course in Miracles, I would have the Course in Miracles lesson in my pocket. And whenever I would get disturbed in my thinking, I would take the lesson out. And I would look at the lesson, and I would put those thoughts that were in the lesson in my mind. And the more I practiced, the better it got. The easier it got to do it. That doesn't mean that the disturbing thoughts stopped coming totally. They didn't. But less disturbing thoughts and more easily dispersed. This is just a discipline. And again, who's going to do it? Who's going to do it except for us? I mean, nobody else can fix us in this regard. We've got to take this responsibility. So while we may not be able to stop a particular thought before it comes, we can certainly decide what to do with it once we think it. And there was actually a part of a lesson not too long ago in the course that concerning this, to actually say to ourselves, I don't want that thought. I don't want that thought. And ask Spirit to replace it. So I don't even have to have the list anymore. I can just ask this inner guide, which is my true identity, replace that thought with something else. And it works. It really, sometimes we think it's so corny. This is one of the problems is we want to be hip and cool, and hip and cool people wouldn't be doing this kind of thing, right? It sounds goofy. It sounds silly. But to actually go through the motion of it and say, I'm going to ask. I'm not thinking, oh, maybe that's a good idea. Maybe it's not a good idea. I'm just going to ask Spirit. I'm just going to ask that inner guide, replace this thought, please. And see what happens. And when I do that, what happens is the thought gets replaced. And the only way we can know that this is true is by actually trying it. So when we try it, when we practice, we have the experience of it. So anytime a negative or unwanted thought comes to us, we can decide to change our mind. Simple. It's a simple idea. But it's marvelously effective. So when any fearful thought occurs, let's just say no to those thoughts and replace them with ideas that uplift us. To take responsibility for our thinking. When we take responsibility for our thinking, it's actually making a commitment to change it. And 30 years ago, I was sitting on a Sunday morning in a church service. We had a guest speaker, and she was a prosperity speaker, and she asked the people in the audience, who has a financial problem that just seems to not go away? And they some people raise their hand. Other people look like they wanted to raise their hand, but they wouldn't. And she just looked out there and she said, well, what are you thinking? What are you thinking about? And then she went on into her talk to point out that the only reason that you have that financial problem or any other problems is because of your thinking. Change your thinking, change your life. It's an old idea. People have been saying it for a long time. So then I want to be responsible for my beliefs. My beliefs are the origins of my thoughts. Here's the thing. Somewhere a long time ago, I don't know when, I got this belief in me that I'm alone. That I'm alone, separate from, and that everybody else that I see is these are separate beings, and that not only are they separate, but they are from time to time dangerous to me, that they're a threat in some way. Physical, emotional, mental, whatever you want. And this idea, the belief grew and reproduced itself in a variety of other beliefs that really just reflect the original belief. I have believed this belief system is in the ultimate isolation of life. Somewhere I got confused and I began to believe in lack. I began to believe that there wasn't enough. I have believed that I am less than, that I'm not adequate, that I'm not up to whatever the standard of the day is. I have believed in the unreliability of God, if there is one, to care for me. But today, I know that all of those beliefs are in error. They are all erroneous beliefs. I know intellectually that they are erroneous beliefs. Sometimes I know it in my heart that they are erroneous beliefs. But they still plague me. They are still, in other words, the belief system is still somewhat in place. There is no fault here. It's not my fault. It's not your fault. But it is my responsibility to do something about it. And so I need to say that I know that these beliefs are the cause of all of the distressful thoughts that trigger feelings of fear which motivate me to act aggressively or to be paralyzed. From now on, this is what I want to affirm. From now on, every time one of these beliefs shows itself, I want to neutralize it. I want to nullify it. I want to say, my Father and I are one. I want to say that, say that right out loud. My Father and I are one. And I want to think, if God be with me, of whom shall I be afraid? And I want to believe I am one with my source. And from this belief will come only abundance, only good, only love, only peace, only light. To be one with creation. To be one with creation. It's the truth. I mean, no matter what your religious beliefs, no matter what your spiritual beliefs are, we know today, I'm talking about even in the material world, we are one with all life. We are connected in the web of life. There is no way we can separate ourselves. We have tried. We're still doing it. We are still trying to separate ourselves from the rest of life. We have gone to war with the rest of life for our own self-centered interests. And it's turned out that because of it, we have gone to war with ourselves. This is our responsibility. It's our responsibility to undo it. But I'm not suggesting that we go out into the world and start fighting against the corporate interests. What I'm saying is we have the responsibility to do the inner work. We change ourselves. We change how we see it. As we change how we see it, as we change what we believe, what we think, what we feel, what we do, we then, taking responsibility for our own life, become an example to others. We become a center of peace. And then our words, our deeds, become an example to others so that together we can stop fighting against ourselves. I think that's enough.